right, Peggy, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to start. The first paragraph of my book is my first memory, as far back as I can remember, because it's such a strange memory I had throughout my life, and it kind of ties into later. So I'm in my baby bed, and I'm in my parents' bedroom, and it makes no sense because in my mind I'm talking to God, and I'm thinking, years went by. How did I even have a concept of God? How could this be real? But this memory never left me. So I'm in a baby bed. I'm talking to God, and I'm saying, "Hey, you sent me the wrong family. These people are weird, and they don't like me. And I know you wouldn't send me here." It's like I have this memory in the memory of this white place and these women, and like every wish was my command. They took such good care of me, and like it must have been heaven that I'm remembering. That I'm older, I look back, and it's like I knew God. We wouldn't do this to me. There's a mistake. And I sat there waiting to be switched. And then silence was my answer, that I'm on my own now, and I felt abandoned. So that's just a baby in a baby bad memory. So then I jump. Next memory I have is 5 years old. I'm sitting on the floor playing Barbie dolls in our house. We live in Constitution, Ohio. It's out in the country outside of Marietta. And I'm just sitting on the floor in my room by myself. My mom comes in and she says, "It's hot outside." Says, "You and John go on down swimming, and me and Terry, my sister, will be down after a bit." John is about 2 years older than me, my brother. Terry's about 3. So in no time, in my little bikini, and John's in his trunks, and we're running down the hill to the pond, and I can't keep up with him. And I was one of 5 kids. And they always thought I was a spoiled brat, and I probably was, but I wasn't the kid that the older siblings look out for. That just wasn't our family. He just took off, and we get down to the pond. He goes to the farthest end and starts diving in, doing laps to the center and back. And I'm on the front middle by the highway, Route 7, where I could look up at our house as the hill comes down. And I kept watching for my mom and sister, and they weren't coming, weren't coming. So I got a little impatient, and I waded in. And I thought, this is so weird because mom and dad always took us down, the 5 kids, as a family. They never just said, "Go on down by yourself." And I loved having that freedom, but yet it felt like there's something wrong here. I shouldn't be allowed down here by myself, because I know there's drop-offs where I've been down so many times. You got to feel around with your feet for drop-offs. And I'd always have a older sibling. My parents were on the bank watching me. An older sibling would grab my arm if I went down too deep from a drop-off. So I thought, I can't go too far, but I wish they'd hurry up. And then I see a board floating in the water. And I thought, I bet I could use that as a raft. So I got my little belly on that board, and I used it as a raft. I got out to the center of the pond. I want to do what my brother was doing. And just as I got to the center, I said, "Hey, John, look at me." And he comes swimming real fast out towards me. Just before he got to me, I thought, "Oh no, he always takes my toys. He's going to take my board." And that's exactly what he did. He took my board, put his own stomach on it, and went out doing his laps on the board. And I can't swim. And I am trying my best to keep my face above water, and it was no time. And I was under the water, and I'm flipping under there, and the water's muddy brown. I lose sense of what's up, down, sideways, and I'm afraid that I'm digging to go up, but what if I'm digging down deeper or sideways, not making headway? And I kept thinking about my mom and sister. I wish they were there. I looked at them as my protectors, and I was screaming underwater, and I felt so alone. And then all of a sudden, I'm at the ceiling of our house, and I'm watching my mom and sister get things out of the cabinets, like they're getting stuff for a little picnic to bring down. And I don't hear anything of this world, but I feel their emotions as if I'm them. I feel their concentration. They're so casually and calm, just thinking, "I want to get this, want to get that." And, no words, just their essence. And then I'm back in the water, and I'm continuing to drown, choking. And all of a sudden, it felt like my throat was going to burst wide open. It hurt so bad. I thought, I can't take this anymore. And then it's just like when you wake up from a nap. I just woke up, and it felt like I've been asleep for a while. And it was that calm, wonderful feeling you have after a nap, so rested and blissful. And the water isn't muddy green, it's a light, transparent green now. And so I wasn't so scared because I can see now, it's not so dark. And my first thought at 5 years old, thinking, my parents lied to me. Why did they yell to me and lie to me and say, be careful, you're drowned? Because obviously there's no such thing as drowning because I'm fine. Like I was just scared for nothing. And I thought, I can't wait to tell my siblings, guess what? There's no such thing as drowning because that's what I thought was happening here. And I drifted down towards the bottom of the pond. And before that would have terrified me. But now I'm just watching the fish bump into me and I could see their mouths and their fins open and closing, their tails. And I was just, when they bumped me, I would just go off like driftwood. And I thought that's strange that they're not afraid of me because Dad take us fishing and sometimes us kids jump in, try to grab a fish with, our hands and they're scared of us. So why aren't they afraid of me? And then to my left, this vision opens up. And I'm watching this as if it's happening. I see me walking through our living room, look at the little fishbowl mom had, and she had got that day at a treasure chest and put it in there. And I thought, how come they're not afraid of that treasure chest, but they're afraid of my hand and I put it in? And it was like God's way of helping me understand what was going on. Because I got this aha moment. It was like, oh, I understand. Like I get it now. The fish knows something I don't. I'm dead. And like, oh, well, and how I remember every single memory that happened. Um, and I thought, oh, well, I don't want to be a dead girl bum this pond. And I thought I could imagine that my parents and the kids in the station wagon would be driving through and they'd probably point to the pond and say, that's where Peg is. Like I would always be the bomb this pond. I don't be a dead girl bomb this pond. And I thought that'll freak people out, to come fishing. Oh, there's a dead girl bomb that pond. I don't want to ruin it for everybody. This is a fun place to come to go fishing and swimming and just these thoughts I had. And then I was at the top of the water and it's like, my vision's different because like looking at a fishbowl, you can see below and above at the same time. I could see below the pond and above at the same time. And like, this is weird. Not one or the other, but at the same time. And I thought, well, I'm bored below. I will go above. And I went up slowly. I got high as the treetops directly above where I had drowned, right in the middle of the pond. And I thought, this is far enough for now. But then there's this dialogue going between myself because something's saying, I'm afraid of heights. Well, that's silly because you're dead. Well, but I'm just getting used to this. So there's this dialogue going on. And then I look to my right and like, do I go towards Belpre or my left? Do I want to go towards Marietta? And I'm thinking um, that, I have freedom now. I can do anything I want. And then I hear a woman's voice a certain distance from me. Like I could tell physically where she was, but I didn't see her. And she said, no, don't. If they find you soon, you might go back. And I thought, go back. That's not how death works. I know that much. I'm dead. I'm not going back. And I thought, well, I'll be good for a little bit, but you know what? I don't have to listen to anybody now. I don't have to go in at bedtime. I don't have to eat my vegetables. I can do anything I want. And usually old people die, but I'm dead and I'm a kid, so there's got to be kids that's dead somewhere. I want to find somebody to play with. And so I went right towards Belpre, and there's a 2-story white house. I've tried to find this house over the last few years, and I still can't find this house. And so there's a 2-story white house, and I go through the side porch, go right through the door, and inside is old people, like white-haired people sitting around a table talking in the kitchen. And they stop talking as soon as I come in. They all look at me. And I duck my head because it was 1966 and you didn't interrupt adults when they're talking. So I was really shy to interrupt and speak. And I said, I'm trying to find kids to play with. And the older man and one of the old men at the end of the table said, try the graveyards. When I'd have this memory recurring through my life, I thought, how crazy. Why would anybody say that? And so I went back towards the pond and I head on down Route 7 towards Marietta, and I'm flying over the highway. But right near the pond on the way are 2 boys walking on the right of the highway towards Marietta. One's about my age, one's a few years older, looks like, and they're carrying a bucket and fishing poles. And I'm walking along or going along with them. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And they're ignoring me. And then like telepathically, the one my age is answering me. he says, we're running late. We've been fishing. We got to go. And I thought, well, shoot, they ignore me like my siblings do. So I went flying over the highway. And I remember coming to the billboard that's on the right. And for the longest time, every time I passed that billboard, I was like, what is it about that billboard? So I go past the billboard and I dip down and go to the west side of Marietta, which is the poor side where my grandparents live. And on the corner of the street, as you head to my grandma's, there's a family of poor kid, big family of poor kids, and they're all running around playing kickball in this corner yard. And I'm running around playing, and I thought, well, this is boring. I realized nobody can see me. So I go in and out of houses on the left towards my grandma's. And that's all I remember about that. Meanwhile, at the same time, or then after that, I don't know. Because I also remember being above the pond and um, I look down now, and now my mom and my sister are on the bed sheet when you first come down to the pond, and they're rubbing lotion on their arms, and they're looking at each other. They're facing the pool, but they look at each other talking. And I feel jealous because I'm dead. I'm never going to be old enough to have a older conversation with my mom like that. And I really like to be older and have that conversation with my mom where you could talk about older things. And again, I just didn't hear their words. I felt their essence, felt their mood. And then I looked on the other side of the pond. There's my brother doing laps on my board. And I felt anger like a man would have, not like I ever had as a child, but this anger just was fury that he caused me to drown, that he didn't need that board, and I did, and I drowned without it. And then the next memory I have is I'm hanging over my brother John's right shoulder. Oh, I forgot something. So as I am hovering over the pond, I get a knowing that my family don't love me. And then a voice clearly says, inside of me clearly says, it wasn't me, it was somebody else. They said, children are sent here to be loved. That is why God sends them here. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not fair. You show me my family don't love me, and then you tell me that's why God sends them here, but I'm not loved. That's not fair. And this strong sense of injustice grew in me. And so then I wake up, and my brother's carrying me over his right shoulder up the hill to our house before you get to the train tracks. It's flat above the pond, then train tracks, and the hills go steep, and our house is on the right. And I see my mom and sister, Terry, walking up ahead on his right, and I'm coughing up water down his back. And he says, Mom, can I put her down now? Because I'm puking on him. And my mom and my sister, because I'm dying and I see him, they both turn at the same time and see that I'm now alive. And my mom grabs her chest and went, and shakes her head yes, and they both turn around and then they continue walking. And I'm still feeling their emotions. I feel like they're best friends instead of like mom being the adult. It seems like mom's afraid of being in trouble, and her and Terry's whispering like this is going to be a secret or something. And so John, they go on up to the house. John puts me down on my feet and he runs up right after him. So here I am standing on this road in front of the pond before the train tracks with this knowledge of what it's like. I was just having fun. And now I'm back and I have this knowledge my family don't love me. Why would I go up there? And it seemed like it confirmed it by them just not even like, oh, thank God you're okay or anything. I mean, they just went up to the house and left me. And I'm so sick from this pond water in my belly and I'm weak. And I think I know drowning hurts, but I felt like it was my right and they're going to wonder what happened. But I'm going to go back to that pond because I'm not going to fight it this time, but I want to go back flying and doing what I was doing. And why would I go up to that hill to a family that doesn't love me? And I felt like it was my right somehow. And just as I took a couple steps, oh, that old familiar feeling that I had, I remember now, as a baby in a baby bed that like I was ripped off, like I was sent to the wrong family. And that just like confirmed everything. And so I took a couple steps to go back to the pond, and the angel voice, I call her Angel because I see her now hovering over the road. And she's between me and the pond as you would be walking on that road. And she says, no, don't. I said, why? You know, they don't love me. And she goes, well, you'll have a lot of love someday. And I said, where will I find it? And she pointed towards Belpre. And she was just white, like transparent in the shape of a young woman in a flowing gown. The sleeves were long at the end. And so I went on up the hill and I got on my bathing suit. I didn't see my family anywhere. I don't remember them talking to me at all that day, rest of the day. And I got my nightgown, got in bed, and I reached down and got a nursery rhyme book. And I flipped around to Old Woman Lived in the Shoe. I was too young to read, but I remember it by heart. That Old Woman Lived in the Shoe had so many children, she didn't know what to do. And I was like, maybe that's what the angel meant when she said I'd have a lot of love someday. Maybe I'd have a lot of children. Well, maybe I would have a lot of orphans. Maybe I would love unloved kids like me. And so after that, some strange things happened. Our family went to Vito Lake, just a few miles up the road fishing, my mom, dad, and us 5 kids. And I was bored with fishing. I felt led to go, like something's like, come over here, come over here. And I went over in the woods and it was all cracked, dry, sticks, mud, and it was really ugly. And like, I don't want to go over there to the right. I want to go to the left where the lake was. And something's like, no, no, you got to come over here. And as I'm older now, trying to make sense of all this, I think maybe this was the angel wanting to continue talking to me. And I went over and I thought, why am I here? And I saw a flower growing out from under a rock. And I sat down like this was my new friend. And I like started talking to this flower, like, how did you make it? You grew out from under a rock. That everything here is so ugly, and you're just dancing in the wind like you're celebrating a victory. And something told me that I was going to have a very hard road ahead, just like this wildflower. I was going to grow up in a very harsh environment. But because of it, I would have a strength inside of me that other girls would never know. I would have the will of a wildflower. And so I was so excited, as I was going home, but thinking I got a secret. I'm squishing the back seat with my siblings, like, I'm gonna have this will. Oh, and she said, oh, before you go, there's one more thing. You're gonna be beautiful. So a little girl that loves to play with Barbie dolls, for somebody to say that. And so I was just so excited. And so strange things happened for a while. I remember around that time, I went to pre-Sunday school and teacher says, get out a coloring sheet, start coloring. And I found this sheet. I was like, oh, this is it. This is the one. Like, there's one just for me. And I started coloring. And it was a picture of Jesus sitting on a big rock with one little child in his lap and 2 children, one bigger, one smaller on the side. And I'm coloring, singing Jesus. I'm coloring and I'm singing Jesus loves me over and over. And all of a sudden, and this made no sense for so long, that picture was real. I am standing in heaven and Jesus on that rock, and Jesus right in front of me, and he's looking at me smiling, and these kids are right there, just like the picture. And I wanted to push that kid off his lap because I could feel Jesus's love for the children so much, and I wanted that. And Jesus looked at me and grinned, and I felt like he was thinking, you silly, ornery thing, you. And a voice said to me, not Jesus, but a voice said, Jesus loves children of every color. Never forget that. And so when I look back at this, and it took me a long time for I had this aha moment, color. I was coloring, Jesus loves children of every color. It's so interesting now as I'm older and I look back how these messages are given, like the fishbowl and then like this and just in the wildflower. So different things happen for a while. And it was, I grew up very abused, neglected, and had a very hard time. And when I turned 18, I promised God and myself that somehow I would do something to help abused kids, that I would never forget my childhood. And I got married at 18. I had a little boy, and then a year and a half later, I had another boy. And my husband had come from a big Catholic family of 12 kids. And I always wanted 10 kids. I always told everybody, I want 10 kids at least. So I thought I would have a lot of children. Well, he made me get my tubes tied, which the doctor said, 2 C-sections, that's all you can have. But I was only 20 years old. And I begged him for 9 months. I was pregnant, please don't make me do this. And I was afraid he would divorce me and take the kids, because that's pretty much what he was saying if I didn't do it. And so I got my tubes tied at 20. When I was 25, I had some moles removed, and the doctor looked at my chart off my neck and he said, why did you have your tubes tied at 20? And I told him, I was afraid my husband would divorce me if I didn't and take my kids from me. And he said, you could have it reversed, and you might as well told me I won $1 billion lottery. I mean, I was so happy. I got it, and I begged my ex for months, and he said, fine, you won't shut up till I say yes. So I got him reversed, and the very next month, I'm pregnant for twins. And the doctor calls and says, you're not just not just pregnant, you're pregnant for twins. And so I was so happy. And it was Christmas, not Christmas, it was Easter Sunday, 1986, and I'm 25. And I was the happiest I'd ever been, because we had just bought property. We're getting ready to build a house. And here I have three little boys because I was in the process of adopting my oldest sister, who's mentally disabled, her child. And for three little boys, and I'm pregnant for twins. And I'm getting ready to build a house, move away from his family, which was all fighting and everything, drinking. And so I thought to myself, I remembered the promise I made to myself at 18 that I would help abused kids. And here I am, just, 7, 8 years later, and I am standing on my own hill. And how different things was at 18, where I knew I was going to be kicked out and I needed help, to now. And all of a sudden, I heard our 6-year-old Matthew yell, Mom, Jeremy. And my husband went running down to check on the boys, and I was frozen in fear, and I just started praying. All of a sudden, I'm out of my body. I'm hovering over the field. And I had a knowing what was wrong, that Jeremy was drowning in our creek. And I was saying, that's not possible. That creek is only ankle deep, which we had just bought the property. And they said, yes, but we've had a lot of melting snow and rain, and its creek is up and it's swift. And if he would calm down and stand up, he would be okay, but he's scared. And so instinctively, instead of praying to God, please don't take my baby Jeremy, take my twins if you have to take a baby, I want them, but I can't live without my Jeremy. And my Jeremy was 5. And so I started praying to Jeremy. I said, Jeremy, calm down, stand up. It's not that deep. Walk out of there. And I slowly started walking down. And then Jeremy came up out of the creek just as his dad got to where he was. Jeremy didn't look at him. He was like in a trance, walked over, stood in front of me, said, Mom, was you worried about me? And I fell to my knees, oh my God, Jeremy, my baby. So Jeremy was 5. When he was 20, he had a New Year's Eve party. And I told that story for the first time. Jeremy was in the kitchen making a drink with his girlfriend. And he walked out and he said, Mom, I heard you praying. I'm like, what? Everybody's mouth just gaped open, like whole room went quiet. Like, what? He said, we never heard of NDE or nothing, didn't know what was going on. Like, what? He said, that's what it was. He says, I was scared and I was panicked. And I heard you say, Jeremy, it's not that deep. Calm down, stand up, walk out of there. And he told me recently that, he says, Mom, I saw you down there praying. He says, hovering over you like a drone. I said, Jeremy, that's a near-death experience. He says, no, it's not. Because he's an accountant for the federal government. He's very, he's not ready to believe that. No, no, I'm not ready to go there yet. So that kind of confirmed it for me later that, how did my son hear me praying? What's going on? Are these memories I keep having of the drowning and different things, is this real? Because there were things that was confirming things. So one week, see, that was Easter Sunday, 86. And the next day I started having pain. So I was 2 months pregnant for twins. Called the doctor, something's wrong. He says, no, everything's fine. I did ultrasound in the office. Both babies are in the uterus. A couple of days later, hey, I can hardly walk, pain so bad. By Friday, I was like, listen, I told my husband, take me to the hospital. Something's wrong. The pain was so bad. In the hospital to Marietta, from where we live in Tuppers Plains, was almost an hour away. By the time we got to Marietta, the pain got so bad, all of a sudden it faded in such a strange way that I remember thinking exactly what I thought. I thought, wherever the pain is going, that's where I'm going. Like I'm trailing behind it. Like I knew I was dying. And I said a prayer, God, don't let me die right now. We're almost to the hospital. It'll freak my husband out. And I just pictured him like pulling over and running around the car, don't know what to do. My wife's dead. I say, if I'm going to die, just let me get to the hospital and die there, not here. We got to the hospital, and I told the triage nurse, I said, I don't know if it's a tubal pregnancy. I said, but because my doctor's saying it's not, but I don't know if I'm going to throw up or pass out. So I had him stay and sign papers, put me in a wheelchair with this little blue bowl in my lap, just started to push me down this long hall to find a room. And that's when I died. I thought I want to get that blue bowl, but I realized I couldn't lift my hands off the armrest of the wheelchair. And I lost contact with my body. Like, wait a minute, I'm not going to throw up after all. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out right now. And my chin hit my chest, which I wasn't afraid of passing out because I had stressed so much from his family and him, my husband, that I was 2, 3 times a week, I was vomiting and passing out or irritable bowel. And so, you just feel better after you pass out. You don't dream or anything. So I thought, oh, I'm going to pass out right now. My chin hit my chest, and suddenly I am shot like a rocket through space. And it's dim and it's narrow, and it's almost like being this long straw, like it's sucking and pulling me up. And it's kind of see-through through the walls because it's like I could see this whizzing. It made me feel like it's going through galaxy and galaxy. And it was this loud, bumpy ride. And I thought, oh, I'm so sorry, my children. I didn't want to leave you. And at 25 years old, and I got these babies, I was just like so devastated. And all of a sudden, I'm in this bright white light, and I feel just like me, but I don't see me. And I thought, this must be heaven, but where is everybody?
Hmm.
And I look over to my right, and my eyes are squinting. I think I seen a faint outline of people, and I see from their shoulder, their heads, and they're standing in a row. And then there's another row sitting in front of them. And then I focus on the one sitting up front and center, and I think that has to be God. And I thought I had a complaint department. And I'm like, hell no, I can't go. I can't stand here. I have kids to raise. And then this scene opens up on my left. And it's like if you just walked into a grocery store and you see the girl checking people out, but there's a little boy in front of the cash register on the floor throwing his big fit, what he wants, and he wants it right now. And I believe that was God's way of showing me in a vision, just like with the fishbowl in the drowning. I didn't make these connections for the longest time. Even I told my story so many times, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's so similar. Um, and I think that's God's way of showing me this is how you're acting, like something a young mother would understand. You're acting like a spoiled child. And so I wanted God to understand why I couldn't leave my kids down there. It's like feeding to the wolves. And somehow this visible frame of reference me sees a physical me straight across me. And I'm screaming, okay, my dad did this, my stepdad did this, my brothers did this, my sisters did this, my mom did this. And, you know, show God how bad it is on earth. Why I can't leave my kids down there without a mother's love and protection. Like I was. And I said, I can't have one thing happen to me happen to them. And so God let me know. I heard God's voice, and it was firm and loving and compassionate. But he told me the answer was no, it is my time. And so, and with that, scenario showed me, that I'm acting like a spoiled child. I thought, okay, I got to try something different. I got to calm down. So I said, okay. I said, God, if you can show me my kids would be better off without me for whatever reason, I agree to stay. If not, I beg to return. And then I thought God would just tell me, like in his wisdom, like how it would work out or something, but it's not what happened. So then I see Jesus over on the far side, and suddenly I am just moved over there, right beside him. And he's got a white long gown and brown hair. It's kind of full down to shoulder. I don't see his face or not, just from behind. And as soon as we meet at our shoulders, we dip down and we're above our trailer because we haven't built our house yet. We're above our trailer and it's at night. And I'm thinking, well, I can't see anything. And then we're at the ceiling and we're looking down from the ceiling. And my 3 little boys are in their bedroom in the trailer discussing the fact that mom has died. Now, I didn't want to tell this for a long time because this makes no sense. How could I see something in the future that never happened? But that's what I asked God, if he could look in the future, but he had me look, I guess. So my boys are discussing the fact that mom's died. And I don't know if it was the next day after, or, I don't know. It's like it was fresh. They were just discussing it. And Jeremy says to his older brother, Matthew, I don't care that you say mom is dead. I want her back, and I want her back right now. And I felt his pain so bad in my heart that I retracted. I could not take it. And so now I'm back up in the bright white light, but now I'm right in front of the panel, right in front of God. And Jesus is sitting to my right. So that's God's left. And it's like there's still just this invisible line, but yet I think that I'm at Jesus' feet. I think that maybe I can swear that I saw Jesus' feet in the bottom of his gown. And my hands, I now have physical body because my hands come up front of my face. And I say, who else will teach them about you? And then I'm back in the wheelchair. And I think, what the hell was that? I thought this never happened in the history of the world. Okay, so maybe I should ask for questions before I go on.
Whew. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. Thank you, Peggy. Questions for Peggy?
Let me continue.
Well, I got a couple things. It's at the beginning, it sounds like you experienced what Scott Taylor last month was telling us about bilocation, where you're fully conscious in two places at once. You're underwater when you're 5 years old, and you're above the water at the same time. And then you said you got bored with being under the water, and so your consciousness went fully to being above water. But did it feel like you were in both places at the exact same time? You're aware of both places, or one or the
I
other?
had I had no perception of my body when I left it
Mm-hmm.
until I woke up coughing down my brother's back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me see what else I got. See if anybody else has something. Um, it's interesting. You say God said, no, you can't return. And then Jesus goes with you down. You're on top of the trailer, then you're in the room and you see how upset the kids are. And feeling that pain, you shoot back up. Jesus on your right, you're in front of the panel again. And next thing you know, you're back in the wheelchair.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, there's one part I guess I skipped in front of the panel when I'm sobbing when I'm back after, Jeremy, my son Jeremy's, heart was broken. I could feel it. When I first come back, I realized it's not God's fault that I died. It's mine.
Hmm.
I got my tubes tied. I mean, I thought all this right there. I got my tubes tied. Then I got them reversed. The doctor said every woman has 5% chance to a pregnancy. This gave me an extra 5% is what he told me. And I took that gamble and I lost. And this would kill my twins. So, I caused this with my twins. I caused my sons now to be motherless. I've caused all this. It was no more, my parents did this and everybody did this. It was like what I did. I caused this. I caused that heartbreak in my own little boy. And whatever happens to them, I'm not going to be a hope. I felt so guilty. And then, okay, well, I'm going to, oh God, it's like, I'm going to stay right here until my sons are old enough, when they're old and they die, I'm going to wait right here for them. And then this, like, I accepted it. And then this I'm sorry.
Oh, hello.
Oh, Carol, I'm gonna mute you, Carol.
Okay.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
so once I accepted that, then this big wave of fear come over. This new fear was like, oh my gosh, what if my sons hate God because their mother was taken such a young age? Because I've heard of that, and they never come to heaven. And then I'm all freaking out again. And that is why I said, who else will teach them about you? I wanted to be told, assured somehow that someone in my son's life would make sure they didn't hate God and that they were Christian so they would come to heaven and be with me someday. So that's why I said, who else will teach them, me and my boys, about you? And so then I'm back in that wheelchair and the wheelchair is stopped. I don't know why, but the nurse is talking to another woman, I don't know another nurse who she was, behind me. And something said, once I feel my feet on the foot pedals, I'm all the way back. And finally, I felt my feet, and then they pushed me into this room, the end of the hall, and it was jacked up, and the big light above. And so I laid there, and I'm freezing cold. My husband get me blankets. The doctor he thought he was going to do a DNC. He checked me, thought it was a miscarriage, and then he sat me up and looked at me, and he's like, "Your uterus is still intact. Why do you keep saying it's a tubal pregnancy?" And I could not tell him because I was just dead in heaven accepting it. and God's let me come back is what I wanted to say, because I felt like God give me another chance, like a few more hours to live, to get my doctor to fix me. Whatever it was, if it wasn't tubal, fix it, He gave me more chance to live to get this fixed, and now my doctor is just like, look at my husband, like, what's wrong with her? My husband just shrugged his shoulder. He said, well, if it make you feel better, you can spend the night since you live an hour away, but nothing's wrong with you. So they both went home, went to bed, gave me a private room, and I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up with pain in my right hip bone. I'd get my blue bowl and then wake up with vomit everywhere but my blue bowl. And the nurse was getting tired of cleaning up my gown and my bed. And she says, use your bowl. And I said, I think I'm passing out. And that's why I'm, not getting in my bowl. And then after so many times that during the night, I thought, I'm not passing out. I'm dying each time. I didn't have any more what we call now NDEs. I didn't have more. I thought I had more heaven experience. But I thought, God, please keep me alive till morning. Maybe my doctor will come in early, do an ultrasound to prove I'm fine. But I know I'm not, Just please keep me alive till morning. And maybe he'll come in then and find out what's wrong and fix it. And that's what happened. He come in early. They sent me down to ultrasound. The nurse come in, or the tech come in. My sister's on the other side, um, and they do the ultrasound. And I look over at the screen, and her eyes bulge. She jumps up. Her chair falls backwards. She runs and grabs the phone on this post, and they're in the basement, and says, "Dr. White stat," and she ran out of the room. And I thought, I'm a goner. So I thought, we've waited too long, Now they know something's wrong, but we've waited too long. I'm about dead here. So Dr. White, he comes in and he looks at the ultrasound. He said, Peggy, it's the worst thing imaginable. You've got internal bleeding filling your entire abdominal cavity, clear up to your chest. We got to get you into surgery. But since you're an organ donor, we've got to take you back upstairs and sign all these papers. And so after surgery, he was there with me, and he shed tears and I shed tears. I know how bad you want these babies, and I'm so sorry. And he says, you'll probably have doctors poking their head in to look at you. He says, you're famous in the hospital. He says, it's the biggest tubal pregnancy the hospital's ever seen. And so I had all this morning, depression and stuff from losing the twins. I had this death experience I couldn't talk about, never heard of such a thing. And I knew nobody would believe it. I couldn't even talk about it. I was so depressed. And 2 months later, I'm pregnant again. And we go to a family reunion, and everybody's lined up. It's his mom's side of the family. And everybody's lined up, looking at all this food on all the picnic tables. And I was like, I hear a child crying. And nobody heard it. And I kept asking as I went line, I hear child. Nobody even looked. Nobody paid attention, kept looking at the food. And I kept following the sound of the child crying. And I walked out in this field, and then suddenly I didn't hear the child anymore. And I'm like, I know I heard a child. And as I look back, it is so similar to when I had felt led. We went fishing after the drowning. It was like, come over here. It was just like that. And this voice started talking to me. And because I just heard this child crying. And I don't hear it. I know it has to be here. And a voice said, go check that tall grass. I thought, tall grass, there could be nothing in that tall grass. I walked over, and here's somebody, I found out later, the reason why there's big, long, deep ditch, where there was cabins on the hill at Fort Meigs, and they had dug a trench because water was getting the cabins to reroute the water. But this little toddler boy had fell in that ditch, and his back was barely twitching. He was face down, and I reached down and picked him up. And the moment I did, I could tell I miscarried, and I did. And so I stood him up on his feet, and he looked at me, and all this water's flooding down his face. And he just looks at me like he's seen a ghost. And they takes off running. And his parents are standing at the end of the pavilion because he's pointing at me, talking. He's all excited. And they're standing there going, what? Like they don't see me. And I'm thinking, I'm standing right here, Well, so that was 1986, 2 months after the tubal pregnancy. In 2010, I was a counselor, and this big guy comes in as a client, and I recognized the last name. And I said, did you just go to the family reunions? And it's the first time I told that story about the little boy. And he leans way back in his chair. He said, that was you? He says, my brother swears to this day an angel saved him. He's, I can't wait to tell Mom. We now know who that was. We just thought he dreamt it or something, but he has been positive that he that angel saved him and he drowned and stuff. And I thought, well, that's so weird. So as I got, older, I started putting all these little things together. And like, this stuff must be real. That like, I don't have a fantasy mind. I don't make up stuff. I'm not a liar. I'm not, I'm a very factual, detail oriented person. And I had to finally come to the conclusion when I was about 55 years old that this stuff has to be real. So
Peggy, uh, my name is Matt. I certainly I'm not trying to debunk your story.
that's
You
fine.
say it so forcefully and you believe in it so much. But since you've gained greater notoriety because of your experiences and your book, have you talked to other people who have shared their near-death experiences with you?
I have interviewed over 400 near-death experiencers on my YouTube channel, NDE TV, in the last
Okay.
4 years.
The reason I ask is because you have a very Christian near-death experience. Have you ever talked to other people from different cultures and different religions that have a different identification with whoever the spirit figure is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I find it ironic because a couple weeks ago, I was interviewing someone and we were talking about that, how some people say that it was source, that they don't believe in God. I interview people that are atheists that still don't believe, whatever. And it doesn't matter, because as we're talking, I was like, I got to tell you, I just heard this as we're talking. And I don't know if I've got that like a voice while I'm doing on my channel before. And it said, I go by many names. And I thought, I get it. I get it. I go by many names. So to me, it's like we don't have to argue over, was that God? Was it the source? Was it whatever? People come up and say, this is what I believe this was. I go by many names because I feel like no matter what you call it, it is the God that I know. No matter how you see it, to me is still the God I know. So I don't have to get upset, that they are, well, it was this or it was that. It's like, because I know, I know it's the God I know.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions at this point? I guess one comment, it's interesting, this last one is a premonition you had. This is after your second NDE that you were led to find this boy. It sounds so similar to Tom Sawyer with the premonitions he had after his NDE, where he would be was led to find a little girl in a field who was about to be molested and attacked. Um, so it sounds very parallel to what you just described.
Right after that, with the family reunion, we were leaving Gallipolis, driving through Cheshire, which is about half hour from our home, on our way home one evening, and had our 3 little boys in the back. My husband's driving, and this has never happened before or since. All of a sudden, I said, "Pull over right now." I had to go to that house. And I jumped out of that car and I'm running to that house and I'm thinking, what are you doing? And I'm thinking, okay, when I have to knock on the door. So when they come to the door, I'm going to say, excuse me, I'm sorry, I have the wrong house. But when I knocked on the door, my brother John's ex-wife, Chris, come to the door. I was like, what are you doing here? And she's, I'm babysitting my nephew for my sister. This is the house she's renting. It's like, oh. And I said, you're babysitting your nephew? And she says, yeah. I said, take me to him right now. And I went running through the house to his bedroom. He had the door shut. He's in there choking on Easter basket grass.
Hmm.
And I just grab him up under my arm. I run to the bathroom, start pouring water on the tub. I get my fingers wet. I'm like, I don't know how I knew what to do. And I bend him down and I just started pulling that grass out. And she says this day, if I hadn't been there, she wouldn't know what to do. She was going through the phone book looking for a number to call her sister to say, I can't handle him. And so I got in the car and I told my husband what happened. We don't say nothing on the way home. He just glances at me and I was like, I don't know. Because he knew what happened with the boy in the ditch, and then all this. I don't know what's going on. And then sometime after that, we always put the boys down for a nap. And then my husband and I, on weekends when he was home from work, we'd go sit on the deck and turn on the music and sunbathe a while. And I was like, you know what? I don't want the music on today for a change. And we no more sat down in our chairs, and I heard a slight scuff noise that you would not pay any attention to, but something was telling me, go see what that is right now. You got to go there, got to go there. And I told my husband, I was like, I got to go see. I heard a noise. I gotta go see. He's like, well, I didn't hear nothing, but he followed me. And I think he was starting to realize, what's going on with her. And so we got to end of our long driveway, and I looked up and down the hill, looked down the road, didn't see nothing. And all of a sudden I started running up the hill. And I thought I seen a slight shadow on the road, but I wasn't sure. I got up there and it was just a little bit of dirt on the top of the hill. And on the side was a car that had went off the road and hit a tree. And there was two guys in front with their heads laying on the dash. Their necks were broke. And the two that had been in back had been ejected way down that cliff into the creek. And my husband went down to check on them. And he told me, go call a squad. And I said, get a life flight up here. And they kept dying en route, the two that was still in the car. The other two down in the ditch, they had, I don't want to say brain injury, like when you're out of your mind for a little bit, they're okay. But the two, and they got life flighted, the two was in front. They revived him several times and they was okay. And the people in the squad said they were going to come find us and thank us. But, so like, well, how did I hear that? I don't know. I had no words of NDE, and after effects or I had no idea what was going on. And so I started feeling like started remembering that where I promised myself at 18 I'd help use kids. So I quit my job at as a seamstress for Horner and Harrison. And I enrolled in college and become a child abuse investigator. My first month there, from then on, I worked there almost 8 years. I just knew things right off the bat. I knew this one little baby that it was almost dead, and the other worker and the mom's like, what? You're crazy. I'm not telling you there's something wrong with this baby. Got to the hospital, I failure to thrive, severe failure to thrive, severely dehydrated, and ended up I did 75% of the cases my first 5 years. Then finally I was like, hey, you got to give me a break here and make it more even, because everybody called and would only want me because they said Peggy gets hold of a case, she don't let her teeth out of it till she does the kid safe. And I was getting confessions. I would know things that, be no way. I knew this boy one time, I called his parents and said, I don't, it's not child abuse, neglect or anything. Guidance counselor called me and had me come check that something's off with this kid. And you don't have to listen to me, but something's not right. And the coworker was saying, you can't do that. You can't call. You don't have a report. And I was like, no, I got to. Something's wrong here. And they said, say no more. We thought that too. We're going to go to school, pick him up right now, take him to the hospital. They called not long later and they said, he had a brain aneurysm. It's like, we can't thank you enough, for calling. And so everybody, at the office too is looking at me, but not like, oh, wow, you're great. It was like, there was jealousy. There was competition. There was, they'd remove they wouldn't remove kids that need removed. There's a lot of turmoil. And it was completely hard. And then I started fostering kids when I started college. And I had 60 therapeutic foster kids in 16 years, and we adopted 10. So I ended up, as I got older, I look back at everything, and it just seems like so much was meant to be, even from the nursery rhyme book, the woman had so many children, she didn't know what to do. And that's how my life ended up. I had so many kids. It got really crazy there at the end when I had 10 girls.
So these intuitive knowings, you've already given us, I think, 3 examples after your last NDE, and then you said it frequently happened when you were in this job where you're helping abused kids or neglected kids. Wasn't there also a story about, was it a motorcycle crash?
Yeah, just a few years ago, my husband and I was coming through Tupper's Plains to come to our house, and there was a sign that said road closed due to accident. And so my husband pulled over and jumped out to go ask the cops if we could go on far enough to go to our road. And as soon as he jumped out, I had a knowing. It was a motorcycle accident. I just knew it. And I knew that they're just looking at the guy that got killed. They're not looking at the woman. There was a woman in the back of that, and they don't know. I knew this with everything in me. And I couldn't wait for him to come back. and get in the car. And so I could say, was it a motorcycle accident? Because they think it was just a guy, but there's a girl back there that got hurt too, and they don't know it. And he said, they said we could go on down, and yeah, it's a motorcycle accident. And I was like, okay, how did I know that? Okay, that could be a coincidence, because I'm trying to talk myself out of this. And I said, I got to go down there. He said, I'm not allowed down there. I said, I'm telling you, there's a lady that was on the motorcycle too, and they don't know it. And I was like in this panic for hours all night. And I knew exactly where the accident was. I have a friend that lives down there, and I called her, Chris, actually, the my brother's ex-wife. And I called her. I said, is that accident down in front of your house? And she said, yeah. And I said, do you know if it was one people or two? And she said, well, I don't know. So I kept watching on the line, see what was going on. It was just one man, it said that night. And I was like, I know there was a woman and they don't know it. And the next morning I checked the news again, and sure enough, there was a guy called, said, could you go check again? I think my mom might have been on that motorcycle. And they found her. And so I beat myself up. I was like, don't you ever do that again. Don't you like I could have went down and looked and not made a big spectacle. I just casually walked down. I could have parked far away. And all the things I think, I could have done, because when you go and you help is one thing, but then when you don't listen to it and then you feel so bad later that you didn't listen to your instincts, is not good.
Yeah, that's a powerful one. I think in your other interview, you said that you learned to listen to those instincts, that whenever you didn't, things didn't go too well. Just as a side note, the only other what I've heard describe this that was plagued with these premonitions after his NDE was Tom Sawyer, and he saw two of the big plane crashes to the point where he went around to airports trying to figure out where it was going to happen. And for him, it was like a movie would play out in front of him that something was about to happen. An accident at the landfill. He was able to head that off. He saw something happening where he worked and saved his buddy there. Um, it's fascinating that you've had so many also. He really wrestled with whether it was meant to be and he was not to interfere, but he finally came to the conclusion that if I'm seeing it, I think I am to interfere and interject myself into it. Did you go through that struggle, or did you just quickly realize I better do something when I get this feeling?
Yeah, I realize I've got to do something. Whether it turns out to be nothing or not, that's fine, but I have to check. And, I tried to rationalize, because I also read in the paper that the son said, I believe that woman was on her way to put flowers on her other son's grave.
Mm,
And maybe she didn't want found. Maybe she wanted to be with him. And I was like, no, I should have went. I should have went. I'm going to learn a lesson on this,
mm,
because it's hard when you hear things and you feel things to know what's real and what's not. And so I've been working on that to pay more attention of what's going on, the voices I'm hearing. And I realize that if I'm arguing with what's talking, that's when something's really happening for me to
mm,
argue with it. What is talking to me that I'm telling it, no, I don't want to.
interesting. Yeah, is it a plague for you, or you accept it as a gift where you can help wherever you can?
At first, it was scary. This stuff, things like this would happen, would scare me. And I've learned to calm down and trust myself, because it feels like, am I going crazy? What is this? Um, but now I've learned to trust myself, and I learned to calmly, I can check things out. If I'm feeling, call somebody, call somebody. Well, go ahead and call them. Stop fighting it. What's it hurt? And I may not know at that time why, because it might seem like, well, that didn't seem like anything was going on, but then it'll come out later why that was important. Um, and like I say, just listen to that voice that is saying something that I'm arguing with, to be more aware of what's being said between my ears.
You had, as I recall, another example where you had a premonition right before a potentially fatal car accident you were going to have with a SUV coming right at you.
Yeah, that was a few years ago. I was driving from my home to Tupper's Plains. It's a 2-lane Route 7. And I seen Tupper's Plains in a distance. It was on Saturday. It was almost 11 o'clock in the day. And my husband was at work, and there's nobody on the road. Beautiful day. And all of a sudden, I got this fear I was about to be in a wreck. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's silly. And I'm like, wait a minute. You have come to learn to listen. So listen. What's it hurt to pray right now? So I just said a prayer. God, I don't know why I'm scared. Please keep me safe. And then all of a sudden, I seen a car coming in the next lane towards me. All of a sudden, a black SUV, it just come right in my lane, right towards me. And I've always told myself, if a deer comes out or a car, whatever, don't swerve, because I've always heard you can get a lot worse wreck if you swerve than if you hit something head on. Like, man, this car's just, it's not like they drifted like this on the phone. It's just like intentional coming. And I thought, death wants me and it wants me right now. And so I thought, I'm hands on the wheel, and I'm like, but I can't swerve. And then I heard a voice say, well, you can turn it a little bit. And I just washed my hand, just barely turned to the right. And I braced because I thought, oh, we're going to hit side by side now, because it's now on my side. It's still in my lane. And I braced for it, like at least hitting my mirror. And I'm like, gosh, am I going to get my arm and leg broke? Because it's going to hit me hard on the side. And I braced, nothing happened. I looked in my rear view mirror, and it went out of my lane into its own lane and just went on. And I called my husband, and I said, because I was too shook up, I said, call State Highway Patrol. I think somebody's trying to kill people out here, because it was like it was just out to kill me. And yeah, I thought, what's a hurt to pray? What's a hurt? If you start feeling scared or something, what's a hurt? Just say a prayer.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
David, I have a question.
Yes,
Mhm.
Julie.
Hey Peggy, I was wondering, when you first drowned and then later you said your brother had you over his shoulder. Well, what happened in between those two things? Did he revive you or do CPR, or what?
After the little boy in the ditch was that when my family's ex-husbands get-togethers, and nobody could say I'm sorry about the twins or anything. So I went and sat out in the grass, looked up the night sky, and I saw the drowning from front to back. It's like took me over. And so the next day I went and asked my mom. I only had two questions because I'm still 25 then. Did I drown when I was little? And how did you find me? And she's like, how do you remember that? So the long story short on that, and I actually interviewed her about a year ago, and I put it on my channel, a phone call I had with my mom about it. I said, Mom, what do you remember about my drowning? So the long story, the gist of it all is, when her and my sister was on the bed sheet rubbing lotion on themselves, she said she felt a nudge, and where's Peg? And that's when she realized I wasn't there. So she asked my brother John, where did you see her last? And he told her, and she says, you go down and you keep diving down till you find her. And eventually he found me. And so I said on this phone call that I have on my channel with my mom, so what did I look like? And she's like, what do you mean? What did you look like? I said, well, was I dead? Because I have memory of this and this, but I don't have memory of that. And she says, no, not hardly. She said, when he was carrying you to the house, etc. And I thought, why would he be carrying me to the house unless I was dead, And so everything else, so what she says was he kept diving down until he found me. And then she had told me at one point that, and she didn't remember it on the phone call, but she had told me at one point that she did not want my dad to know about my drowning because their firstborn, Junior, died at 9 months old. Today we would call it neglect. And all my dad's family blamed her. And she said, here's another child that died. And they would be blaming her. So that's why it was never talked about.
Wow.
So Peggy, I've got to ask, you had very vivid memories of this 5-year-old drowning, that you're being underwater, being above, but you just said that you asked your mother if you had drowned. Did these memories not come back to you until after you saw this in the sky and asked your mother, and then these memories came back?
When I sat when I sat on the wet grass at night on night sky, I saw up in the sky just like a big like the old outdoor movie theaters, like a big screen was in the sky. I saw the drowning like a movie trailer from front to back, and it just took me over. And I thought, did I drown when I was little? Because what was that? So that's when I went and asked my mom, and she said, yeah, you did. And so when I asked her, did I drown when I was little? was that real? What I just saw, in that memory. And so the memory kept coming back, more of it over time, more kept coming.
Yeah, that's very curious because we had Linda Jaquette. I don't know if you've interviewed her. This was probably 15 years ago. Darla, you might remember her coming to speak to us. At that time, she had a pretty deep NDE. She had another NDE, and in the second, which turns out to be her third NDE, during her third NDE, she relives drowning at a Sunday school picnic. And she called her mother and said, "Did I drown when I was 4 or 5 or something like that?" And the mother said yes. But it was during her second, or actually third NDE, that she saw everything that happened and then had very clear memories of everything that happened. But until that last NDE, and until she got her mother to verify it, she didn't have any of those memories. So it brings up the interesting point that 85% of people who have near-death experience have no memory of any experience other than they black out and then they're revived. So how many of them just do not remember a near-death experience, or how many of them are just blacked out, whatever that means?
Mhm. Well, after we lived the trailer, we moved in the basement. So it was maybe getting close to a year, or I know it was months after I had lost the twins. We were in the basement, and I was walking through the living room to go to the kitchen to start dinner, and Oprah was new at the time, was on TV. And I didn't hear the word NDE that I remember, but it was that Crystal one lady, and it was Dr. Melvin Morse, which I've interviewed since.
Yep.
And they were on there, and they were talking about they died and come back, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I stood there and just mocked them. Oh my God, how stupid do they think people are? Oh my God, what liars. And I took a step to go towards the kitchen, and something just stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, and here's this dialogue really loud going on. It was crazy. It was like, that couldn't have happened. I'm like, but it did. It couldn't have, but it did. And I had to face it. That happened. So after dinner that night, I told the kids, go in the room, shut the door, and you talk to your dad a minute. And I sat him down at the kitchen table, and I was shaking because I was freezing cold. It was like I was remembering how cold I was, when the doctor examined me in the emergency room. And I told my husband at the time, Jeff, I said, about what happened, the tunnel, the bright white light, and begging to come back, and all this, everything. And he looked at me. He said, I know how it sounds, but I know you, and I know you're telling me the truth. And then he told me something he had never told me before. Before their house burnt down, they had a 2-story house that his parents did with the 12 kids. And he could hear and see a man walking with a wooden leg at night. And everybody laughed at him. He said, I saw him. He would walk through the halls at night. And he says, no, he says, so I believe you, because, some things we just can't explain. I was surprised. I didn't know what he would say. I thought he would think, well, you're crazy like your sister, you got to go to the mental hospital, get on medication, something. But but I had to tell him. But now those people on that TV, I still thought they were crazy. But it jump started my memory. Like, wow, what happened was really real. That happened in the emergency room, that was real. And 30 years after that 2 pregnancy, I continued seeing the same doctor. And I took my husband, Jim, and I, we've been together, we've been married 27 years now. And it was the year that I was going to be on, year before I was on Dr. Oz. So it was 2018. And I said, I want to tell you something for 30 years. And he says, well, you better tell me then. I had my husband in the room, and the nurse was in there. And I told him the brief version of the ectopic NDE. And he says, I believe you. He says, in all my years of practice, I've come to believe exactly what you're saying right there. And the nurse says, oh, he does too. So it just felt so much better. And what's ironic is when I needed my records to go on Dr. Oz, they're like, those records are so old, they're calling Columbus to see if they're microfiche. They're trying to get them. And then I was like, stood there praying. I was like, God, I really need these records. Please help me. And then I heard, well, you brought it up to your doctor in your last exam. Maybe he made a note. And I looked at the girl who's searching. I had 2 girls searching. And I said, check my last exam, see if there's any notes on there. And she goes, oh, yeah, it's right here. And it was right there talking about the tubal pregnancy. He says it was done by me and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes.
Wow.
I have a question, if I might. I want to go back when you were talking about your Christian faith. I guess I have two questions. The question he had asked about other faiths, and you heard I go by many names. So I wanted to ask you because some Christians say you can only get to heaven if you believe in Jesus. So that's my first question. I wanted your thinking on that.
I don't want to put my belief out there on that because I feel like it's up to God. I feel like it's up to God. Like, so people live in other countries, has never been taught they don't go to heaven, I don't believe that. Or people think that it's just maybe too good to be true, but they don't get to go. Or people that had so much bad stuff in their life, or whatever upbringing or whatever has made them come to that conclusion. I leave that to God. I can't say who's going to heaven and who's not.
Okay. So I guess I have a thought too. See what you think. I guess I feel like at the moment, you see you see terrible people and like Hitler. I guess everybody, or not everybody, but many people probably think Hitler went to hell. And my thinking is, you don't know what happens at the time of death. That to me, if you see God, and however you want to say that, if that's such a transformative experience, I would think that you would want to be there with God as you define it. So I'm just thinking, anyway, I don't know if that makes any
That
sense.
makes me think of Howard Storm's story.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great. I love that book. Oh my gosh, that was wonderful.
Yeah. And I know how I felt, feeling like it was my fault, that I died. It was my fault my twins was going to die. It was my fault my sons would be motherless, that my son Jeremy would have that heartbreak and pain. And to feel that being my fault, I can't imagine the torment you would feel if you actually, on purpose, hurt someone. Because, that was unintentional on my part. And I had that extreme guilt. So I can't imagine, because I feel like you're faced with truth in that bright white light. As much as I was kicking and screaming and didn't want to be there, and I had to accept that this was my fate, God said it, it was my time. The answer was no, I wasn't going back. So I had to accept it. And, I know people like to hear beautiful NDEs about rainbows or, angel wings, but that was my experience. And it left me ultimately with gratitude that God let me come back. It was my time, and God let me come back to raise my boys. And I get to see my grandchildren graduating from high school now and starting college. And it's such a blessing every day to know no matter what happens, it goes wrong. Like my husband's cancer, I can't complain because, a lot of women die of ectopic. A lot of women die of a lot of things and don't get to raise their kids. And the gratitude I have is that God let me come back. It's not political about because it's Christian. It's not because of this. It's gratitude because I was afraid to come out. A social worker investigator, and I worked hard for my good reputation. And did I want to come out looking crazy and talking like this? But then I had a thought one day that I never forgot. It was, what if when I die the next time for good, and I don't tell anybody, I don't talk about it, and what if God looks at me and says, did you tell anyone what I did for you? And I'd be like, no, I didn't want to look crazy. I didn't want to look like a liar. How shamed I would be. And so I thought, let the chips fall where they may. People can think I'm lying. People can think I'm crazy. They can think I'm attention seeking. They can think anything they want, but I am going to tell the truth. And I am going to create. And then, when I start creating a space for other people to tell their truth, and that's why I don't want anybody to feel, and I tell them on my show, they'll say, what is your audience like this or like that? And I say, my audience is mostly Christian, but it didn't start out that way. Some of them kind of left because some think I'm too Christian. Some think I'm not Christian enough. I get it on both ends. They don't like this NDE because it's too new age. They don't like this is too Christian. So I said, you just share your truth. Just think of this show as your show. This is your time to shine, and you tell your truth. Because to me, that's the only way we're going to understand these experiences. If we start saying, you can't say this, you can't say that, you have to fit in this box, we're not going to understand a thing about the truth of these experiences. And that's my goal people say, what you think of this, what you think of that. I just have questions. I don't have a lot of answers. I just have a lot of questions. The one thing I have learned by interviewing these experiencers is I started noticing the importance of the word ask. So many times when things was going wrong in their NDE, they asked, or things was going wrong in their life and asked, God, show yourself to me. And then this thing happens. And the importance, and I have learned that in my life. If you're wanting something, if you're wanting your life to go a certain way, or you're praying for someone, I think you have to be really specific and ask and be careful what you pray for.
I have one question or observation. I'm curious what your thoughts are on fate and free will, these premonitions. I mean, it's an interesting example where we've heard a number of times people say, no, I'm not going back. This is my home. I'm staying. And they're shown future events in their life where there'll be a lot of love, like you mentioned. And they said, yes, I want to go back. It's like they're being coaxed to go back. Yours is an interesting case where God says, no, your time's up. You're not going back. But then it sounds like Jesus intervened and you went down and you're seeing your sons talk about you dying, which obviously didn't play out. So that whole question of uh, how does time work and these premonitions and this example, you've interviewed a lot of people. Do you have any thoughts on that
I do.
subject?
Because I've had all the same questions a lot. But what I started noticing is when I had my IANDS groups before I started doing online, I could talk to more people, in person after the group, before the group. A lot of people would say, I never had an NDE, but let me tell you what happened one time. And it would be something like I was going through this intersection and there's no way that I couldn't have been hit. And it's like I went right through that car. They would have these experiences, or something, they was here and then they ended up over here, and it's not possible. And I just think apparently God can do anything he wants. If he wants to make you go right through that bus and not feel a thing, if he wants you to, say this is Tuesday and this stuff happens and you wake up and it's Monday and never happened, I think God can do anything he wants to do. I think he can bend time. He can, because I would say, God, I know, like the two pregnancy that night when I'm, praying, God, I know you can't keep doing this. You can't keep bringing me back. Please keep me awake till morning. And I laugh later. I think I'm telling God what he can't do. And the thing all comes down to, I think, who is this voice? No matter what your religion or non-religion, who is this voice that knows it's not your time? Who is this voice that says you got to go back? Who is guiding us through these experiences and creating them tailored just for us? Who is recording all our memories so they have the life reviews? There's something going on out here. Who's telling us, hey, don't go in that car. Don't trust that man. Hey, go check on this person over here. How do we tap in to getting more used to listening and trusting that? how do we start to trust that it even exists in the first place? That's kind of where I'm at.
Interesting. Um, uh, it sounds as though you feel that though we're here to make our own choices, that's how we learn. We are getting help from the other side. That you've got too many examples in your own life or others you've interviewed where things happen that you can't explain that kind of saves them from making really bad choices or something happening to them.
It hasn't been easy. You know,
Have
it's
you
been
ever felt that you were
adult life.
being misled by a mischievous energy rather than a godly, benevolent energy?
Only when I feel really angry
Hmm.
and I start thinking I want to do something to somebody that has really hurt me, and I've really suffered to try to cope with it for the last 20 years. And I start thinking, and then I have to turn on my Christian music. I mean, that's what works for me. You know, or I start praying, or I start remembering my, you know, uh, my spiritual side, or, because you have to get out of it, because you can get into that dark place and feel like you're sinking down in. Like before I wrote my book, when I was 55, I think, my PTSD, I would start all these memories. I felt like it was on a record player that kept replaying. I couldn't stop the bad memories. And then one day I had this little vision. I was hovering over a creek and I'm looking down and I see myself below, and I'm bent over and I'm picking up these little bits of light out of the creek. I'm like, what in the world? And then also I got this aha moment. Oh, something let me know through that little vision. I have been shoving the bad experiences under the rug, the same as I have been shoving the good experiences under the rug. And I need to share the bad, you know, the child abuse and everything I went through, kidnapped and raped at 16, had an out of body experience, that I had to talk about the bad in order for people to appreciate the good. And I grabbed my laptop and I just started writing, and I didn't stop for 3 months. Stop me eat a little, stop sleep a little, and write. And I had my book done 3 months. And I didn't intend to publish. I was just going to put it in the drawer and, you know, just tell my kids when I die, I want my grandkids to have it, you know, when they're older, because there's some bad stuff in there. And then I happened to go into IANDS group in Columbus, and the group leader there, Nancy, I told her I had it in a notebook and a binder, and I said, this is my baby. She said, oh, I understand. And that's all there was going to be to it. But then she emails me the following Monday. It was a Saturday. And she says, why don't you call my publisher? And I'm like, no, I couldn't. And he's a former monk, started his own company. And so I called him and I said, I need to tell you though, I said, I'm not worthy. He said, it's worthy because you're worthy. And something about him saying that to me somehow healed me of some kind of wound, that I was worthy to write my book and to say, you look at this and see if, because I just did not feel worthy. Of course, I need a lot of editing and everything, but you know, it got published, but it's not a bestseller or anything. But I am so proud of that book. And it still feels like it's my baby, because it's my life story, it's my truth. And I've had people start to do a screenplay on it, and they start to put something that's not true. My memories are so vivid. I know exactly word for word. And I see all these scenes in my head exactly as they happen, that there's no sense of writing a book if it's lies. And I said, you cannot change one word, so nope, we're done. And I'll find somebody or never get done, because it has to be truthful.
Very cool.